Hey, what's up YouTube? I've got a quick video here on something that was a bit of an interesting finding for me recently just ahead of wedding season, and it's to do with the A7R V for video and specifically using APS-C lenses. When I first bought the A7R V, it was predominantly for when I'm doing hybrid coverage and having been able to have one camera that sticks to photography and then a second camera on my body that gets more video clips and whatnot. And the R5 having crop mode to be able to still get 22 megapixel files was a big selling point for me, because I could punch into APS-C mode and have sort of two focal lengths from a prime. So I'd done a couple shoots in the lead up to wedding season kicking off, and thought for a bit of fun I'll give the Tamron 28-75 a go, and found that I was really liking it. Now this then meant if I was going to use that as my main photography lens, would I need to have APS-C mode to jump my prime into two different focal lengths? And could the R5 then actually become my main video camera and have a lens on there like the Sigma 56 APS-C lens or the Sony 16-55 that would cover all the video needs, but then I could still switch into photo mode if I wanted a really shallow depth of field with a 56, for example, or whatever it might be. I was just exploring options. And what I found almost by accident was when I put this Sigma 56 on to the R5 in photo mode, perfect. You get that 1.5 crop automatically because it's an APS-C lens. And you get that equivalent sort of, I think it's just short of 85 millimeters, I think, or 86, something like that effective field of view. So the photos were great on it. And with it being such a light lens, it was like, yeah, I could just slip this into the pocket and wouldn't have to carry a spare bag. But then when I switched it over to video mode, it was quite interesting because I know the R5 only has in 4K 50 FPS, so slow motion, which is what I would typically use at a wedding for video. The R5 has a 1.2 times crop on its sensor compared to the A7 IV's 1.5. So on an A7 IV, it's just like in photo mode because it automatically detects this as a APS-C lens. When you then switch to video mode, you've got that 1.5 crop and boom, you're at the same effective field of view. On the R5 though, I didn't know whether it would, what that 1.2 times crop would do for video on an APS-C lens. And what actually happens is it takes the focal length of the lens in full frame mode and punches in 1.2 times. So this 56 becomes something like a 65 millimeter or 70 millimeter focal length rather than the 85 that you would get if you went into APS-C mode itself. So that then presented an interesting problem or interesting scenario, because would you get heavy vignetting if the APS-C lens wasn't covering the full image sensor or the full image sensor cropped by 1.2. So I've done a little bit of a test with each of my APS-C lenses. For the Sigma 16mm here, you can see that it looks pretty much fine. I think it does have enough coverage of the sensor to still be usable, maybe some slight vignetting in the corners. For the 16-55, you can see that there's still quite a bit of vignetting at 16 millimeters. Zooming into 35, it still vignettes a bit, but that might be usable. And then with a little bit more of a crop, and then at 55, you've still got some vignetting as well. So probably not usable, the 16-55, unless you were happy to crop further in post. But that kind of then defeats some of the benefit of using 4K if you're having to crop anyway. Next up, the 56, and this is where it was quite interesting because there's no vignetting there, I don't think, or if there is, it's just a tiny bit. So I think that's perfectly usable, but you're not getting that 85 millimeter field of view. You're getting a whatever 56 times 1.2 is. On the Tamron 17-70, kind of a similar story as the Sony 16-55. You've got a quite heavy vignetting at the 17mm end. At 35, you've not got that much, so a tiny crop could probably get rid of that. And then right into 70, a bit more vignetting comes back, so probably not usable without a significant crop there. And then finally, just for a bit of fun, the Super Zoom 70-350, it looks usable at 70, so you're not getting any vignetting there. I think I then went to 135mm, and again, looks fine to me there. And zooming all the way into 350, it looks fine there as well. So that was quite interesting for me in terms of a realization ahead of doing any weddings that there's always drawbacks with these cameras. The 56 is the one that there's two lenses that I would typically use for wedding videos, would be the 16-55 and the 56 from Sigma. So from these, I could use one. The Sigma would be fine. The 16-55 probably not, in terms of the way I work. But yeah, I just thought that was quite interesting findings, and something I wasn't really sure about before buying the R5 of how does that 1.2 crop work when you put an APS-C lens on there for the 4K 50. But as you can see, it reverts to the actual focal length of the lens and multiplies that by 1.2. So depending on what sort of coverage of a full frame sensor each APS-C lens gives you, you may or may not be able to use that on the R5 for video without a further crop digitally. Hopefully this was somewhat useful to some of you video shooters out there that still stick around with some APS-C lenses. I don't think I would be using the R5 for video, but handy to know in case you were thinking of buying one of these for hybrid coverage and thought it would give you all the benefits of an A7 IV with a higher megapixel count in crop mode photos. But depending on the lens, may or may not be usable for that. Thanks for watching.